Hello, Year 13. Firstly, I just want to say thank you to those of you who submitted your notes for last lesson. It's really useful for me to see who is completing the remote learning so that I know who to get in touch with and potentially offer support to. So thank you for that. Your daily review today is 5 questions, so I'd like you to pause the video here and spend no more than 5 minutes answering those questions. Off you go. Okay, so question 1 then, list 3 things that the narrator subs in for in sub. So there are many things there. She subbed in for a football match when England won the World Cup. She subbed in for a rugby match, for a Beatles gig. You could have put in for the moon landing, for a jockey as well, many different things. Question 2, why is the title of sub significant? So we looked last lesson at the double meaning of sub, how it could be an abbreviation of the word substitute, meaning someone who stands in for someone. But sub is also a prefix that means below or under. So it could also be a criticism of women's place in society and how throughout history, women are seen as subordinate to men. 3, I believe in the look at. That's a quotation said by Marlene in Top Girls, and it's I believe in the individual, look at me. So that's a good quotation to remember, a nice short one to save you having to flick through the text in an exam, where she shows her isolation really well. Did Churchill hold socialist or capitalist views, and how do you know? So Churchill was quite scathing of Margaret Thatcher, who was famous for her capitalist ideologies, and therefore we can infer from that that Churchill was a socialist. Although Churchill herself said she didn't like labels, particularly with regards to feminism. She didn't want to be labelled as a feminist writer. She was happy to be known as a socialist writer. And then finally, complete the quotation, her marriage to Leonce Pontellier was, sorry, there's a typo there I've just noticed, purely an accident. So again, in terms of presentations of marriage, that quotation is really important for our analysis of The Awakening for paper 1. Okay, so the plan for the week then. This week you will have had 3 face-to-face lessons with me and then 1 independent study session. So my plan for this week is today's lesson, we're going to explore how sub links to the wider themes that we've been studying and therefore how we can compare sub to Top Girls. And then in tomorrow's lessons, for Friday's lessons, you'll have 1 normal lesson where we'll go through essay writing skills that you should attempt during the time that you would have been in period 2. And then our final lesson will take you over an hour to complete, so that will form your independent study period and also period 5, and in that we're going to be writing a timed response. So the next 2 lessons will focus on knowledge that we need to create that timed response, and then the final 2 lessons will be you writing your timed response. So today's lesson is going to centre around the big question, which wider themes does Duffy explore through the poem Sub? Being able to answer that question will help you to know which possible exam questions Sub could be used to answer, and will help you also to compare Sub to Top Girls through the themes. So before we start that then, we're going to need to recap some of the knowledge we gained in last lesson. And last lesson was all about thinking about the big ideas that Duffy tries to communicate to us through her poem. So we looked at how history seems to be dominated by the celebration of male success, how it seems to be more difficult for a woman to be recognised for her achievements, how women are just as capable of success as men, and how suffering is an inherent part of the female experience. All of these big ideas also link to what Churchill tries to communicate to us through Top Girls. So already by exploring the big ideas of Sub, we already have some points of comparison between Sub and Top Girls. So For example, in Act 1, the women throughout history, through literature, etc., show how history is dominated by the celebration of male success. The scene where you have Mrs. Kidd come in and talk to Marlene about her achieving the promotion over Mr. Kidd, her husband, demonstrates to us how traditionally, before this moment in time, it has been more difficult for a woman to be recognised for her achievements. The fact that Marlene was chosen for the job over Howard shows how women are just as capable of success as men. And then suffering as an inherent part of the female experience, we obviously looked at that when we looked at Act 1 of Top Girls and how each of the women suffered and endured in some way. So how can we relate this knowledge of the big ideas of sub and of Top Girls, to an exam style question? So in your exam, you're going to compare Top Girls to Feminine Gospels. You should choose at least 2 poems from the collection Feminine Gospels for your comparison. So you're not just looking at 1 poem, you're looking at least 2 from the collection. And your question will be based on a theme. Because different schools teach different texts, it won't be possible for you to answer a question based on a character like you might be asked to in Othello. So this question will be a thematic question based on a theme. So we've done a lot of work pinning down what the key themes are that could potentially be used for an exam style question. And whilst it's impossible to draw up a definitive list of themes you could be asked to explore, we have got a list that seems to work with both of our texts that could potentially come up in the exam. So we could be asked to explore the theme of insecurity, fulfillment, isolation, family and motherhood, the female experience, identity, or the relationship between the past and the present. What I would like you to do is just have a look at that list and pick out which ones you think sub would be a good poem to focus on to explore that theme. So pause the video, just spend 1 minute picking which of the themes you think apply really nicely to sub. Off you go. Okay, so I have done the same. I've picked out a few of the themes that I think link really well with the poem, and the first one I've picked out is the theme of fulfillment. So what I would like you to do, I'm going to talk through 4 key themes that I think are useful for us to explore. I'd like you to make some notes, and then there's a consolidation activity at the end of the lesson where you're going to summarise all of your learning throughout this lesson. I'm going to start by talking about fulfillment in Top Girls so that you can see how the 2 texts compare. So through Top Girls, Churchill seems to suggest that one source of Marlene's unhappiness is that she constantly strives to achieve more. She never experiences true fulfillment because she's always looking for more. She continues to be ambitious, doesn't feel like anything truly fulfills those ambitions, and therefore never experiences fulfillment. So this can be evidenced when Marlene states, "It's a step." So when one of the women in Act 1 congratulate her on her promotion, she doesn't say, "Thank you, I'm really pleased." Instead, she says, "It's a step," suggesting that she still feels like there's further for her to go. So the happiness that she experiences through her promotion is not entirely fulfilling. She still strives to achieve more. So at this point, if you wanted to, you can pause the video and make a quick 1-sentence summary of the idea of fulfillment and how it's explored in Top Girls. Okay, so in terms of how fulfillment is explored by Duffy through sub, on a surface level, it seems that the narrator leads a very fulfilling life. She achieves various different successes in a number of different fields, and so when we read the poem, initially we can think that she's had a very fulfilling life. Perhaps this links to the idea of female achievement and the possibilities for women in the modern world, remembering that Duffy herself experienced great achievement, becoming the first female poet laureate. And that for Duffy would have been an example of how women can achieve in the modern world. So it could be a poem to celebrate female achievement. However, when you scratch beneath the surface on a deeper level, you could argue that the narrator's constant seeking of a new challenge and a new achievement in all of these different fields could be symbolic of her lack of fulfillment. It also raises some questions like, can she truly experience fulfillment when her own successes aren't recognised or celebrated as her own? She has to adopt a male persona in some of the sections of the poem in order to be celebrated for her achievements. The title Sub also seems to suggest here that her success is viewed as less important than males achieving the same success. And therefore, is this a poem truly about a fulfilled individual, or is it a poem about how women haven't been able to achieve fulfillment throughout history? Again, this is a good point to pause and summarise your knowledge in one sentence. In terms of what I would like you to do then, I would like you to pause the video here and find evidence in the poem that she experiences a lack of fulfillment. Which quotations do you think best show that lack of fulfillment? Off you go. Okay, so I've picked up some myself. So I've talked about and agreed on a whim to slim, to the weight of a boy, ride the winner at Aintree. So that for me shows how quickly her goalpost changes, if you like, how quickly she changes what she would like to achieve and what she would like to do, meaning that she never truly fulfills those ambitions. Also, there's the sense as well that she's had to change in some way to achieve. So she has to slim here, and that could be emblematic of how women have to change in society in order to achieve. So we looked at the diet as well, and how the narrator of the diet doesn't seem to achieve fulfillment because she is constantly pushing the goalpost of where she needs to be. And then I also looked at the end of the poem. What I think to myself is this, and then the poem stops quite abruptly with no real conclusion. So we looked at how postmodern literature quite often raises questions rather than answers them, and I think this is a sign that that's what's happening here as well. The fact that the narrator has no thoughts on her achievements could maybe suggest her feelings of a lack of achievement and a lack of fulfillment throughout her life. Sorry, there's lots of noises going on in the background. I've got my dog and my children here, so they're both very noisy. Okay, the second big theme that I would like to explore then is the theme of isolation. And again, we're going to start by looking at this theme in Top Girls. So Marlene is undoubtedly an isolated character. She rejects relationships with others, believing that they'll hold her back from success. Both romantic relationships, family relationships, even friendships, she seems quite rejecting of. She doesn't visit her family, and at the end of the play we discover that she has even left her daughter to find success. And we also find that she masks a hidden sadness potentially at her isolation, when she can't hold back her tears and she cries when she's back in that family home. And therefore Marlene, in her rejection of relationships throughout her life in favour of pursuing a career, has become an incredibly isolated character. But there's also a theme of isolation in the poem Sub. Duffy hints at the isolation experienced by the narrator throughout the poem. So despite achieving success as part of a sports team, at the beginning of the poem, she's left alone to celebrate this success, so she doesn't get to celebrate with her team. Can you find evidence of this in the poem and write down a key quotation that shows the narrator's isolation? Off you go. So I've picked out the following quotation. But skipped the team bath with the lads, sipped my champagne in the solitary shower as the blood and soap suds mingled to pink. So she hides her female body in order to participate in the sports team, but then she doesn't get to celebrate with her team their collective success. Instead, she is left in a solitary shower, a shower completely on her own, which hints at her feelings of isolation as part of a team success. And that could show how females sometimes feel isolated in their success, how success can lead to, for females, isolation. Our next big theme I would like us to explore is the theme of motherhood. So in Top Girls, Churchill conveys the idea that the modern world presents women with a choice. They have to choose between motherhood or a career. Churchill seems to show that there's not a way that you can balance both. And that's shown both through Marlene, who chooses to leave her child and sacrifice a relationship with her child in order to focus on her career. But also Joyce chooses motherhood and therefore feels a sense of entrapment that she can't go out and achieve the same successes as Marlene because of her choice to be a mother. And so therefore Churchill shows us that society and social expectations presents the modern woman with a choice between the two. They can't have both. And the contrast in Marlene and Joyce's characters really shows that to us. We also have the women in Act 1. For example, Pope Joan's career ends when she gives birth because it reveals to the people of her society that she is a woman and not in fact a man, and therefore shouldn't be Pope. So for Pope Joan, her career ends when she gives birth, and so motherhood puts an abrupt stop to her career. And this seems to be similar in Sub. So Duffy shows how motherhood undoubtedly changes the life of a woman, the path of a woman. Initially, pregnancy is seen as liberating and empowering for the narrator. So she says she felt the first kick of my child whacked a century into the crowd. So just as she achieves a great sporting success, she feels the first kick of her child. And therefore, we can see that pregnancy and a female body isn't something that will hold a woman back from success. However, the motherhood does change her path. So she says, motherhood then kept me busy at home till my girls started school. Not match fit, I was talked into management when Taylor went. So it shows how her path has changed because she's become a mother. She can no longer play sport. Instead, she has to take on a management role. And I think Duffy has included this to show how this is a challenge for lots of females in their careers. And this is still a problem now in the modern world. So whilst laws have had to be introduced to protect women who choose to have a family and continue with their career, very often women can feel held back in their career because of their choice to become a mother. However, she then does remind her reader that females can balance a career with motherhood, just as Duffy did herself. She had a daughter and still achieved great success as a poet. And the way Duffy does this is to remind us that the narrator quickly then changed her path and agreed on a whim to slim to the weight of the boy and became a successful jockey. So whilst motherhood seems to put a temporary pause to her career, therefore showing how that can happen for all women in society, Duffy reminds the reader that it doesn't have to be limiting and that we can quickly change and adapt to balance a career with motherhood. And our final theme we're going to look at together is the theme of identity. So when we studied Top Girls, we looked at lots of references to clothing and how they asserted something about each of the characters' identity, either as a woman or in terms of their power. Can you remember what the following characters conveyed through their dress? So 3 notable characters in Act 1 mentioned the way that they dressed. And what did it show about the character? So Pope Joan, how did she dress? What does that show about her? Isabella Bird, how did she dress? And what does that show about her? And Marlene, how did she dress? Okay, so just to quickly talk through, Pope Joan had to mask her female identity and dress as a boy in order to be able to study in a library, and that's how she ended up taking on the role of the Pope. So she had to assert a masculine identity in order to be successful and to achieve. Isabella Bird and Marlene come from very different times. Although Isabella Bird was a Victorian woman, she defied expectations of the time, and perhaps Churchill shows through her the changing attitudes towards femininity, because Isabella Bird, whilst people said she was masculine because of the way that she rode her horse, etc., she consciously dressed as a woman while she was travelling and asserted a feminine identity whilst achieving that success. And it's similar for Marlene as well. I don't know if you remember when we looked at gender performativity and the idea of power dressing as well. Marlene could wear trousers in the office, but chooses not to because, again, she wants to assert her identity as a woman that is achieving success. She doesn't want to take on a masculine role in order to have that success. This theme also makes me think of the map woman, because Duffy continues with the idea of masking something, of hiding something. So the narrator in Sub also has to mask and hide her female identity. She bandages her breasts beneath her shirt when she's playing football. So she tries to hide parts of her body that assert her femininity. And this suggests that society wouldn't be accepting of her female identity in these roles. So the idea that women have to take on some kind of masculine persona in order for their success to be recognised and celebrated. Okay, here is the consolidation activity that I mentioned at the start of the poem. What I would like you to do is to copy out the table that you can see on the screen. The table names each of the 4 key themes that I've talked you through today. In the second column, I'd like you to tell me the big idea about that theme. So what does Duffy show is the big idea about fulfillment? Can a person ever be truly fulfilled, do you think? And then I'd like you to note down in the final column some key quotations linking to that theme that will enable you to explore that theme. Again, I'd like you to show me the work that you've completed in this lesson, both your notes and the consolidation activity, by submitting it through Show My Homework. I know a couple of you were unsure how to do that, and because you're a small class, I'm happy for you to email me as well, just so I can keep a record of who's keeping up with the lessons. Okay, thank you very much.